Now from tonight we're asking you something very interesting. What's really driving people towards office romances? And in our studio tonight to discuss the issue, Sohail Seth, CEO of AVSEQ01, who says, I will not say anything, I will say it on the show. We'll wait for that. Nikita Anand, former Miss India and a model who feels each adult is responsible for his or her own behavior. Sanjana Kumari, Director of Center for Social Research, who feels this trend is very shocking. And joining us from Bangalore, image consultant Prasad Vidappa, who says people don't consider adultery a serious offence anymore. But first, the story that has made it up front tonight: long hours, shorter deadlines, increasing competition, shrinking social life, all seen as a threat to conventional institutions like marriage and family. But changing lifestyles have also come to mean changing social values. And the Times Now poll conducted reveals just that. It may sound startling, but our poll reveals that nearly 1 in 5 of the 288 married professionals surveyed have found the time for an extramarital affair. The convenience of an office romance, considering the number of working hours, explains why 19% of married professionals surveyed are currently in a relationship with a colleague. And not surprisingly, it's the young brigade for professionals in their 20s and 30s playing the field seems to be very popular. 19% of those in their 20s and an astounding 30% of those in their 30s are adulterous at the workplace. Thanks all so much for joining us on Afternoon Tonight. Sohail, you said that you don't want to comment on it and you will say it on the show. Does this shock you? Do you think it's an emerging trend or it's something which has happened all the time?
No, I don't think it shocks me at all. For the simple reason that there are many things that should shock us in real life and real terms, but they don't. You know, I don't think this adulterous at workplace, just because you have 7 days in a week and you've got to conduct a poll almost every evening. I think when people are adulterous, they're adulterous, period. We're trying to link and trying to read too much into office romances per se. Look at the social structure we live in. It's fast-paced, it's competitive. More and more our value erosion is happening. Whether it's right or not, I'm not a moral preacher and I'm not an NGO activist. I believe that people in the times we live in a very competitive space. They have very competitive long hours at work and at play. They believe that their values do not necessarily get compromised with a fling or two. That's their belief. Is it right or is it wrong? Does it threaten conventional institutions?
But what has competition got to do with
I'll tell you,
romance?
You're staying longer hours in the office. You're working. No, don't question me as if I'm involved in one. I wish I was, but I'm not. The point I'm making is that these are things that are happening around us. I mean, why don't you object as vehemently to corruption? Why don't you object as vehemently to the breakdown of marriage for reasons other than adultery? Today, even if you look at the commitment levels in a marriage, if you look at divorce rates, if we had conducted the same poll to understand separation and divorce in this country, that's also increased. I think commitment levels are falling for the simple reason that the index of commitment has moved from affection to commerce.
Right.
The index of affection has moved from something which is long-term to something which is immediate and short-term.
Nikita, would you like to respond to that?
I'd like to say that, what you asked initially was that do you find it shocking?
Yes.
All I'd like to say is probably the percentage. That's probably the only thing I'd like to say, because there's always a lot of debate and talk about conservative society and is this an emerging trend, and it's always been
office romances which is happening, which could have a fallout, a very serious fallout, if it's taken personally. Not that it's happening to me, just like Sohail, but in case it happens, it could have a very dangerous fallout. Have you ever given that a thought?
I don't think it's because it's adultery at work that, it could have a, dangerous fallout. I mean, you could do this anywhere, you could do any other possible thing, you could have differences, probably not because of adultery. So that is not really the question. I mean, this is possible because of any reason, not this.
Ranjana?
I think I really consider that such a research, first of all, what is the basis of such a research? Who did you really speak to? That's very important. Of course, but are these page 3 and MG club types, or are these normal.
Love doesn't just happen to three types.
Yeah, you're right. But I think if it is normal, 500 people going to office and in a professional relationship inside the office, it's extremely important statement that you're making through this research. Perhaps a very, very minuscule data which is non-consequential if you think a researcher or a social scientist like me has to look at to generalize a trend. But at the same time, I would think that it's very important to understand that any kind of relationship between a man and a woman, or between man and man, woman and woman, whatever, between two human beings in marriage, if you're saying that, then it has to be mutuality of trust and interdependence and some amount of caring and loving each other. That is extremely important. Any two people at any point of time. And when it happens that you breach that trust between the two people and you are in the office.
So it is serious.
For me, another thing very important in your data is that it's about 20 years, when you're in your 20s.
20 and 30.
You say 20s, I would think is too much early for
what about
young people to settle down in a relationship. Perhaps there is much more possibility of exploring. But when they are doing it at the maturity of 30s, I think this is totally unacceptable. It is wrong. And if you are, and there is nothing like, I hate people when they say moralizing. I hate that because you are breaching trust. If you have the courage to face the reality of your life and you are spending it, then walk out of that marital relationship like people in Western countries do. You just decide, be truthful to yourself and to your partner.
Mr. Bidappa, if you can hear me, sir. Mr. Bidappa, the research also throws in this fact that only 2% from the south of India actually were found to be adulterous at workplace. What do you attribute that to, sir?
I think maybe it has something to do with changing women's attitudes towards sex. And if a single woman in an office is having an affair with a married man, is that part of your poll? And if she is doing that, maybe it's just her choice. And men are always happy to do this sort of thing. I don't know whether the poll also revealed what sex everybody was having a relationship with. But I presume that at least one of them was unmarried or were both married. You must let me know.
No, this is about married people. This is about married people. I can't even, what I asked you was that the south of India, apparently only 2% said that they have been in an adulterous relationship at a workplace. We are not really talking about the rights and wrongs of it, but we're talking about a trend in urban India. And the south says only 2%. What do you attribute that to, Mr. Bidappa?
I'm not so sure whether people are lying or not or telling the truth in this poll, because it seems like there are a lot more people like that involved in affairs. And I think it really has to do with changing attitudes that women have towards sex these days. It seems to reflect that more than anything else.
Right.
And I think that there are more women in the workplace now, and maybe that's another reason for this trend.
I have to take a break now.
I'm not talking about the rights or wrongs
exactly on saying that, let me take a break now.
Responsible statement on his side to say that
let me take a break. Yes, let me take a break.
However, it has to become a gender issue at one point.
Time for a break. No, it will not become a gender issue. I have to take a break. Now it's a gender issue. I have to take a break. But when we come back, we asked a few people what their take on extramarital affairs in workplace was. Stay.
No, I think there's nothing wrong with it as long as the other side does not know about it.
Welcome back on Afternoon Tonight. We're asking you what is driving people towards office romances. Through the day, we've been asking our viewers whether they were adulterous or not. And after compiling the responses, we've got so far 29% said adulterous and 71% said they were faithful. You keep those SMS coming in at 8888. Please send us SMSs at 8888. While conducting the survey, we asked a few people why extramarital affairs at the workplace was on the rise. Here's a look at some of the answers.
It may be normal also, because if you're not happy and all, if you're too tense at home, you don't get, the husband doesn't understand you, or you're not able to understand the husband. And if you have a romance, it keeps you also happy.
Most of the time we are in the office, so it's going to happen. You're going to tend. It's a human tendency.
We spend a lot of time in office, and we spend a lot of time with a lot of colleagues, and yes, that of course that is a very conducive atmosphere to actually develop a relationship. And I think But I think there's nothing wrong with it as long as the other side does not know about it.
So you do some very serious work, you know, I mean the kind of work that you do, long hours, there are deadlines you have to deliver. Tell me something, are these kind of, you know, you're compartmentalized, you're Sohail Seth who's working, you're Sohail the friend, you're Sohail whatever, the commentator. Are these boundaries getting blurred somewhere, where at the workplace you're trying to get everything in those 12 or 13 hours?
Look, let me give you some hard realities of today's working environment. There is a higher level of stress than there was earlier. There's a lot of gender equality. There are more and more women working, and I must say this, I think it is not about women's attitudes changing as was made out to be by someone on the program. I think largely there is a more liberal atmosphere. Also there's an element of youth which Ranjana referred to and alluded to, saying that if your research or if your poll is showing a lot of the younger bandwidth people getting more adulterous, it's also because a certain amount of sexual liberation is associated with mental freedom. Whether it's right or wrong is something else. You know, we try and say that, oh, if we are free, if we are cool, then we can have these things. Adulteress is not, to my mind, only indexed to, as I said earlier, to a workplace. It is a mindset. It is a mindset which is mired in something that is, to my mind, deceitful. Whether you like it or not, it is deceitful. You're deceiving someone else.
Yes, you are.
The very nature of adultery, the very nature of adultery is deceitful. Is deceitful good or bad? That is for individuals to know. But is there a moral or is there a value erosion that's taking place in Indian society? Yes. Why? Look at the kind of sunrise industries. More and more long hours, BPOs, call centers, nights blurring with days, merging into days.
Right.
There are, you know, even simple things I've seen over the years, even training programs, workshops, off-sites, these all engender a kind of relationship or bonding where the heart and the mind may slip. I mean, you know, everyone's a human being. No one's coming into work and saying that instead of signing the attendance register, can I actually notch up how many adulterous affairs I'm going to have?
Right.
No one gets appraised on adultery as well.
Right.
There is obviously all this happening in the domain of our workplace.
Right.
To just say that the workplace is the only thing that engenders adultery, to my mind, that is a misnomer. That's a misnomer.
No, we are not saying that.
I think adultery happens in your bedroom, it happens in your home.
Everywhere.
Most importantly,
I would like to, let me get Nikita
most importantly, it happens in your head. Adultery happens in your head. It doesn't happen in an office room, it doesn't happen in a conference room, it doesn't happen when you're video conferencing, or for that matter, anchoring.
Nikita, tell me, you're a model. I mean, the kind of work, you know, the Sohail was talking about.
No, but I can't refer to model.
No, not at all, Sohail. But the point is that you also work very closely with men. You are working long hours. Do you think, if I just want to ask you, does it happen that you have this bonding with a photographer? This is all hypothetical. I'm not even insinuating anything.
Absolutely.
Do you think as a person who's attractive, who's young, who's an achiever, who's been Miss India, would you think you would actually transgress that line and say, okay, this is my only opportunity. Again, I'll correct myself later.
Yes.
This is where I can have an affair, rise in life, become Miss India, do everything, cry if I have a bad hair day, everything. Would you do that? Or do you compartmentalize yourself?
No, I wouldn't do that.
You wouldn't do that.
I wouldn't do that.
You wouldn't do that, right?
So that's what answers the I think very irresponsible statement made by one of the panelists sitting on the other side, is talking about women changing their attitude towards sex. I think the point is driven in a very risky manner, because if you are saying such a thing, you're talking not only about urban upper middle class and people like those. You're talking about hundreds and thousands of girls who are walking out of their home boundaries and getting into the workplace now with great ambition in life. They are taking the challenge to take on life now. Then their own stride. So I think it's totally wrong here to be corrected immediately, I think.
Mr. Bidappa, if you can hear me, sir, the panel says, without naming you, and I'll ask you, that, you know, this is absolutely incorrect just because more women are coming into the workplace, and that's why we have more office romances. It's not about more women. It's just work pressure. Maybe you're thrown together. Now you tell me, you're an image consultant, sir. Are you more vulnerable than, let's say, someone who is a clerk in a bank?
I think it is to do with changing attitudes, because I stand by what I said. I think that a lot more women are in the workplace, of course, but also the fact remains that if people get married very, very early, and in their 20s, you know, like so many people having affairs over there, did they marry the very first person that they met and then decided that they were not really suited, and then these office romances begin? Or is it just, as Suhail says, just part of the 9-to-5 ethos now?
No,
and that this is something they do like taking a coffee break?
Right.
Or is it because you're traveling abroad a lot more and traveling to different cities,
Mr. Bidapa,
spending so much more time together?
Yeah, Mr. Bidapa, also I asked you in the first section that, you know, the South seems to be very conservative about it, just 2%. Whereas if you see a lot of South Indian film stars, they have more than, I mean, they have 2-3 wives. I want to understand, why is urban South India so conservative? What's the reason? I mean, look at Bangalore. It's a city which is, you know, scintillating, something that we all look up to. Why only 2%? If you say that women are liberated, how come Bangalore women are not that liberated according to you?
Well, I just find that people in the South seem to get married a lot later. I think they've finished having their fun before they get married. They experiment with sex, and then they get married at a sensible age, like in their 30s, and maybe that's why. You know, it is true. Young women in India get pushed into marriage at a very early age. And then when they get into that marriage and marry the first man they've met, the one man they've slept with, 5 years down the line they think, what the hell? I mean, and it is what the hell. Come on, let's be frank about it, you know. I'm not insulting women over here. I'm just saying that they are becoming men too. Everyone's got the same attitudes now. And why not? I think it's a great thing. And I would advise every young woman that she must have a few relationships before she gets married. You're absolutely right in saying that marriage should be as sacrosanct as possible. But that's because young people must be given their heads a chance to lead their lives, to live it the way they want to, and make their choices in an informed manner.
Right.
That's what I advise my daughter and my son to do.
Yes, thank you, Mr. Bidapa. I will come back to you. He just sealed it all for me. I'm from the South and I got married very early. Anyway, time for a break now, but when we come back, we'll tell you which city tops the list of unfaithful. Welcome back. We're asking you on Upfront tonight, what is driving people towards office romances? Sunil, you've been saying throughout the section that I'm not going to define what is right or wrong, but you did speak about trust. I mean, you used a different word. Tell me, you know, in a relationship, in an office environment, I do not know if you'd ever face it, but if someone came and said, you know, this is really disturbing me, a spouse came and told you, particularly, you know, when it happens that a lot of women, and these women, Ranjana, you should be telling me this, that a lot of people, women say that, you know, someone gets ahead because she is particularly close to the boss. How do you view this? I mean, this is a negative impact of the so-called office romances.
See, again, you're mixing lots of issues. One is you're assuming, which is again a very male chauvinistic thing to assume, if a woman in this country is successful, we believe she slept her way to the top. No, but that's the tenor of your question. I don't think it's about, you know, how you rise to the top. I think it again epitomizes the kind of character, the kind of pedigree, and the kind of breeding you bring to your workplace. To blame it only on the workplace and to assume that all adultery starts and ends with the workplace in itself is a silly notion. Research apart. I have said, and Prasad mentioned that in passing as well, I reiterate what I started by saying, that adultery is a mindset issue which is mired in this new liberalized regime which embraces everything from commerce to affection. Is it a good thing or a bad thing? I'm not here to pass judgment. All I'm saying is that this is a trend that is visible in India.
No,
as for workplace, one minute, let me finish. As for the workplace, there are norms of sexual harassment, there are corporate governance issues which can address these issues substantially and in substantive measure. Is this trend going to increase? Yeah. I've always said that this will, as more and more people lead more and more stressful lives and look at escapism. By that logic, there would be many in rural India who would say even the very nature of consumerism is bad. To replace Datun with Colgate in itself is bad. So let's not get into that larger debate. Is this trend happening in India? Yes. And will we see an increase?
And
yes.
Delhi seems to lead with it with 30%.
Well,
That's what I researched.
Delhi you have parliament, so I mean I'm not quite surprised about the adultery. You know, people are unfaithful to their own political dispensation in this city. But that apart, I think on a more serious note, as far as Delhi is concerned, there is a North Indian male mindset that is all pervasive. We disrespect women, unfortunate as it may be. We have no respect. If you look at the atrocities against women, it's a very North Indian mindset. If you look at the disappearing girl child, it's largely prevalent in northern India. It's between Haryana and Punjab. So I think a lot of that also has to do with the social carving of this of the states that are adjunct to Delhi.
Right. Ranjana.
I think it's very important to look at the issue we are discussing, you know, it would disaggregate. You have to look at, are we talking about adultery? That means you are in a marital relationship.
No, you know
and
something.
let me complete. No, let me complete first.
An
That's what
affair
I'm saying.
needn't be physical alone. It can be
No, no, no.
emotional. And
No,
I'm
no,
sure a
I'm
lot
saying-
of
you see,
women
that's what I'm
would even object to that.
So
There
now
could be SMS aphrodisiacs, you know.
So then I'm coming to that. No, I'm coming to that, but I'm saying that if you are finding a second romance in life, you are finding somebody more compatible with you in life,
And you are married.
then it's just like you have to have the courage, just like in Western societies, when people find somebody who they fall in love the second time, they do have the courage to face the consequences.
So you say you walk out.
But
What are you doing in
otherwise,
that?
adultery is illegal.
Nikita, would you say
Yeah.
that you
Adultery
started off?
is illegal, and you can
Let
be
me get
sued
this
and
young
you can
woman
be put in the jail for being adulterous.
Right. You said you started by saying each to his own,
Yeah.
adults and things. Now, what, Ranjana? Put this in perspective. You work in an organization or someone you care about, and this exactly happens. Do you think the person affected should walk out?
I will still say what I said earlier, that it's an individual's choice. How serious you think it is, whether it's the person who's having an affair on the side, or it's your spouse at home who's getting affected. It's your individual choice. I'm not saying this is good, it's bad. Coming back to the point of the alarming percentage that has...
Delhi, 30%.
Yes, Delhi, which I completely agree with Sohail. It's the mentality, and that's something you can't change. Which is probably why you have higher percentage in Delhi, compared to the other cities. Now, it being at workplace, of course, yes, is because of the long hours, and like it was earlier said, an atmosphere which is extremely
Let me
conducive.
get Mr. Bidappa. Mr. Bidappa, if this is the growing trend, Mr. Bidappa, if you can hear me, sir.
I can hear you.
Yeah, if this is a growing trend, no one wants to sit on judgment here. They said this is happening. No one wants to say whether it's good or bad unless we look at it legally. What is your take on it ultimately? You see, you're happy for women who are liberated. But if this is the trend in the workplace, how are you going to get work done? A lot of people watching this show tonight, who have young men and women at home, they would want to know from someone like you.
Well, I'm not so sure if people are actually having sex at the workplace, I think the affairs happen elsewhere, when they're traveling, when they're sort of over weekend resorts, when they have all those bonding sessions and all the corporate numbers that keep going on. So maybe that's where it happens. And maybe they are on their way to discovering each other and
I've
divorcing
completely
their
run out of
respective
time, Mr.
spouses.
Bidappa. Thanks so much. So basically the panel says that affairs do happen at the workplace, but they can happen anywhere. Perhaps when you're withdrawing money tomorrow from the ATM, you could actually fall in love. Thanks for watching Upfront. For all the news updates, keep watching Times Now.